You want to have a cow, but you don't have generational wealth to build fences and barns? I'm going to tell you how we did it. That's Rosebud back there. Hi, sweetie. I'm going to tell you how we have a cow without a ton of infrastructure and cost. I think this is going to be a really helpful video. If you're like, I really want to have a cow, there's so many benefits. But most of the time, especially if you're looking on Instagram or other places, you got to be a millionaire. So let's talk about it. This is Rosebud. She is the star of this video, the sweetest Jersey cow in the whole wide world. The setup that we have for some context. So number one, we moved onto our land 4 years ago. We've been building and adding things as we go. So here's kind of a view of the setup that we had before the cow. Number one, we had a shed that's 8 by 12. No, I think it's a little bit longer, 8 by 16. I can't remember. Probably 8 by 16. Nope. One second. I remember it was written right here. We have a 10 by 16 little shed out here. So it's, you know, a normal shed. There's, in most places, you can buy a tough shed, or there's a shed company that makes sheds. We bought this almost 3 years ago is how long we've had it for. And we just have been using it to store random chicken stuff, pig stuff, goat stuff, things like that. We have some chicken runs, a rabbit run, a greenhouse, and things, but we don't have anything that's suitable for large animals. We built that. That's our shop house, our barndo that we built, and then we just have 5 acres of land. Now up here we have some pretty good pasture during the spring and summertime, and we have some other spots that have some pretty good pasture. So we got our cow back in, I think, August of 2024. It is now December of 2024. So we've had her for 4 months. I think we got her in August. Don't quote me on that. But that is the entirety of the infrastructure. So we don't have much. Our property is not fenced, and our property just is pretty flat up top, but then the front of it is rocky and has some grade to it. So that is what we're dealing with in terms of infrastructure. So the cow that we have here, Rosebud, I wasn't involved in the purchase of. I think we paid $3,500 for. Cows are like the new flex for crunchy ladies, is what I discovered. So we were buying milk from a local Mennonite family who had dairy cows. Hi, sweet pie. Now, if you can't afford a cow, there's always people that have cows, and you can buy milk from them for sure. You want to make sure it's a good place that they're on it. We've bought milk from a few places before that haven't been the best, and you can definitely tell with quality and stuff that, you know, they didn't take care of it right away. So that's one thing. If you can't afford a cow, there's ways to get the benefits of it without having to do the work and the expense. But that's kind of where we were at. So the first thing that my wife did was, with her friends, she went in, they found a cow. I think our friend Tam found it and was like, hey, this cow looks really good. We should check it out. Now, Rosebud, I think, how old are you? I think she's 6 years old. 5 or 6, something like that. And I apologize, I don't know her exact age. I'm dealing with husband facts here. But they found her on Craigslist, I think, and they went and bought her. So number one, the thing I think that was really helpful was Tam is knowledgeable about horses. And so she went and checked out the cow. And she's really friendly. The backstory was an elderly lady had owned her, milked her whole life. And so she was used to being milked. She was also pregnant. She's pregnant right now with the Black Angus calf. And she was in milk. So that's some good things. You can buy cows that are not bred. And, you know, if that's the case, you have to breed them. And then you have to wait for the milk. So my suggestion would be, if you're going to buy a cow, make sure that they're in milk and that they are used to being milked. We do have a friend that has another cow. And that cow, she raised from a year old, bred her, and then started training her with milking. It's a lot more difficult to train a cow to milk if you don't have infrastructure. Like if we had to teach her how to do it and it was our first cow, it would have been very difficult. So having her already being used to being milked, and also that she's like super sweet and really kind, that made the whole process way easier. So I think step number one is finding a good cow that is going to be a good producer for you and that is easy to milk. That's really, really important. And I mean, I don't know what we would have done if she would have been kicking me and, you know, not wanting to be in a halter and all kinds of things, because she's the best. So that's a really, really big deal. My thing would be, if I was going to buy another cow, I'd go up to her, I'd pet her for a while, I'd give her some treats, see if she'd let me put a halter on, and then try and go touch her udders and see what she does. Is she going to kick me? Is she going to run away? Obviously, cows don't know you. They're going to be a little bit skittish around you. It took us a while to get used to each other, but Rosebud loves me now, and I love her. Right, Rosebud? She definitely loves me. So, the cow is probably one of the most important pieces here in this whole thing. So it'll be interesting once she calves what her personality is going to be like. Is she going to be rude? Some days she's grouchy. You can tell she's a grouchy pregnant lady. But is she going to be rude? Is she going to be happy? What's that going to look like? We don't know yet. That'll be a fun adventure. She's due in May. I don't remember. I'm sorry. So the thing I think next important is having land and space for it. So I think with land, if you have some good pasture area, that's going to be great. She's going to be so happy in summertime. Now, I mentioned that my wife bought the cow with 2 of her friends, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't super excited when we were having the idea of adding a cow, because I already felt like we had a lot of work in everything that we do, and I was like, man, this is going to be tons of work. I don't know if I have the time. I don't know if I have the energy. That's honestly where my head was at, but I was like, let's do it. We could use the milk. It'll be great. And especially the way that we bought it. So they split it in 3. Our friend Tam has a really good barn. So if it gets really, really cold, for example, sometimes it gets bitter cold out here, we can get her into the barn. And so we have a spot for her that's covered and much, much better from the elements. So that is definitely good to have. And if we didn't have that, I'd probably be a lot more stressed out. I'll show you what we built for her setup real quick here in just a second. But the other cool thing is that the other friend that we have, they have beef cows and they have a lot of land. And so they provide this as our food piles. Now you're going to notice that we have a fancy tarp system. And so we got grass hay. Our friends, Kyle and Sammy Joe, have amazing grass hay. And they have alfalfa that they harvest and they have for their beef cows. So they have equipment storage for all of their hay. So storing food is a big deal. We would need to store food somewhere. We couldn't tarp a whole bunch of food. So we'd either need to get a bunch of specifically like people to deliver it, and that's a possibility, or have a big spot to store all the food because we didn't have it. So our friends go and drop off the food. That's what they provide, and as much as we need. She goes through that about once a month or so. Getting the cow and having somebody help provide the hay, and they show up and they offload it from their truck and they have skid loaders and things, that's really helpful. If you don't have friends like that, you're probably going to need some equipment because it's heavy for this stuff. You can't move it by hand. You could buy smaller bales, definitely, and that's going to be more labor intensive. But, you know, having the big bales is helpful because she eats a ton of food every single day. So, by the way, in our market, those big bales of hay, I think, are like $120, and then I think the big bales of alfalfa are $140. And that price fluctuates every single year based on like harvest and yield and stuff. We live up in northern Idaho, and they mostly make hay up here, which is great. So the fields aren't irrigated. They make canola and wheat and stuff like that, and some other things. And so for our climate, the food is plentiful and not very expensive. And we got some really good grass, and she loves this grass hay, so that's cool. This feeder here that we have, my neighbor actually gave it to me, and he just was like, hey, I have this extra thing. He dropped it off. We used it for the goats for a bit, and then we got rid of the goats because they kept eating my apple trees, and I couldn't keep them contained, which was really annoying. So our experience, by the way, we had goats, was the only type of grazing animal that we've had. We wanted to get sheep, and we're thinking about some sheep, but we have Miss Rosebud now, which is great. Let's talk about fencing. Down here, he actually has a fencing business, and he does all kinds of different fencing. Now, wood fencing is incredibly expensive. That pretty metal fencing is incredibly expensive. My guess is if I was to put like a pretty white metal fence around my property, it'd probably be to the tune of like 15 grand or so. Probably a little bit more. Who knows? It's expensive. Labor is expensive. Materials are expensive. Who would have thought that fencing would be such a big cost? Now, my other neighbor that lives down here at the end, the one that gave us the feeder, he recently put fencing in because he's got horses down there. So he built fencing. I think he spent $8,000 to fence in a couple acres, and it's just cattle panels and T-posts. So it's not even like the pretty fancy Instagram-worthy fencing. So what we did with Rosebud was, if you've seen this so far, we don't have any fencing. We just have T-posts with electric wire. And this is good because we can move it, we can make it bigger and smaller and move her around. And the plan is to graze her around, especially in the summertime. It's a lot warmer, so she doesn't need the shelter. Or we could walk her in here and, hello, my sweetie. We could walk her in here, hello. And move her around really easily. So looking here, super simple. We just have a plug-in generator. We chose to do plug-in because it's stronger and more consistent. We've used the solar panel ones in the past, and those typically don't shock as hard. So you want to train them with a strong shock. You want to make sure it's strong enough. Rosebud never tested it. We had a calf with her called Daisy. That was our friend's orphan calf. And Daisy would try to break out, especially as she got bigger. But Rosebud never did. So we have just a simple fence line here that is what we use for our fencing, and it gives us the flexibility to change up the size and everything like that. So this is her pen for winter time. We've got her pretty well contained. Hi, sweets. And then that's it. Now for shelter, they do need shelter from the cold. And I'll show you our Instagram-worthy lean-to that we built, which is right here. Now, I made a video about building this. I think the cost for this whole thing, we put shingles on the roof and everything. It's really good for waterproof and from the wind. The wind comes from this direction, usually comes from the southwest. I don't know why that is, but almost always comes that way. So it's blocked from the wind and the rain, and I think we're going to probably put some kind of a feeder inside here for when it gets very cold. Right now it's December, and the coldest times of the year are January and February, usually. I think January is the most cold. So making sure that she has adequate fencing. Now I could also build the front cover that's like a wind block cover as well for that if I wanted to, and we could, close her in at nighttime, put the food in there, and get her all squared away. But right now we're just using straw and building up some deep bedding. We don't clean it out too much because the manure helps to keep it warm in there. And so that's pretty much it. The setup for this, I think it was $700 or so to build this thing, and it took a day. It was really simple to build. It's not beautiful. We could paint it if we wanted to, but it works great. And I went that it's about 8 feet wide by 12 feet on the top. I just made it so that it was 3 sheets of plywood up there, and then just a simple little pole barn. I didn't put any concrete footings or anything. It's just dug right into the ground with pressure treated lumber, and that's it. So that's all we have. Now, you need the food. You need to have a water system as well, and that's definitely one of our weak points because we don't have any hydrants over here in this direction. Definitely something on the list to do, but we just have had so much in building our house that we haven't had time. At some point, we're going to build a really pretty barn. We got a quote from one of our friends to build a barn, and the one that we wanted to do was about $140,000. So not on the list right now, but sometime, definitely. But with water, what we do is just use 5-gallon buckets, bring it over here, and then fill it up twice a day. So it's labor intensive, but we don't have a choice. With the water, in like summertime, the problem that we can't do is that the hoses freeze. And so managing hoses in the freezing just doesn't work out. So we pull 5-gallon buckets and fill her up, make sure she's always full of water. We have our little tank defreezer, and she's happy with that. She's got plenty of water, and she produces right now 5 gallons of milk a day, which is a ton. And so she's been typically between 5 and 6 gallons of milk per day, which leads us to the next part. You need to have someplace to milk her. We could milk her in the field if we wanted to. She's good enough that she won't move around, but it makes it so much nicer because we live in a place that has terrible weather, And so we just use this shed. We bring her in, we feed her some grain, she stays put. Sorry, chickens. And so she stays put in here while we milk her. And it's super simple. We have a milking machine. I highly suggest getting a milking machine. Hand milking takes forever. And so that reduces our time and workload dramatically, which is really important because right now, altogether, it takes about an hour a day in milking her, handling the milk, doing that kind of stuff. Which I think leads us to the last point is once you have the milk, you have to do something with it. So you're going to need to get a fridge. This is our milk fridge, and we bought it for $8.99, $95, but it's actually a dual purpose. You could be a stand-up freezer or a fridge, which is cool. You could buy a lot cheaper of a fridge on Facebook. You don't need something like this, but look at how much milk we have, guys. It's crazy how much milk we have. So my daughter, Lily, is getting really into cheese making. We sell 6 gallons a week right now. We're selling it for $6 a gallon, so that helps offset cost for barley and things that we buy. So anyways, storage of milk becomes a significant factor if you got a cow producing a ton. And not every Jersey cow produces 5 to 6 gallons a day. So just got to figure out what to do with it. I will say that we have dramatically reduced our number of trips to Walmart, which is an hour and a half away. We used to go probably once every 10 days or so, honestly, just to get dairy products, because my wife has a bakery and we do a lot of stuff like that, and it has come down to like once a month. Like we don't go hardly, it's dramatically less actually. And so, especially with the price of butter and milk and heavy cream and all of that stuff, it's a huge savings for us, honestly. So we're probably a little bit different just because we bake all the time and things, but the time savings of not having to go plus the money savings is significant. So our setup works really well for us. We don't have to have a huge amount of money to get started. You have to have a little bit, but you know, if you were building fencing and a barn and water systems and electricity systems and a milking parlor and a stanchion and all those things, you'd be in the 6-figure expense range. So at some point we're going to add that, but for now we're really happy with this setup. Let me know what you think about Rosebud in the comments, and if you have any questions, let me know.